The Scifi had been observing Earth for centuries, studying its inhabitants from a distance. From their distant observation posts in deep space, the advanced alien race had catalogued the planet's natural resources, its animal species, and even the development of human technology. However, there was one thing they had never fully understood: humans themselves. Zorath, the leader of the Scifi exploration team, stood at the front of the ship's command room, gazing at the blue and green orb below. Earth was so different from their own homeworld. The Scifi lived in a society where everything was controlled: emotion, behavior, reproduction, and even thought. They had long ago perfected their culture, eliminating what they considered chaotic elements like desire, passion, and irrationality. To them, humans were a puzzle, an anomaly. These beings, who were so far behind in terms of technological advancement, still relied on emotions and instincts to govern their lives. It was illogical, primitive, and yet captivating. "We are ready to make contact," said Zorath's second-in-command, a stern Scifi named Lyra. "The humans are unaware of our presence. Shall we begin?" Zorath paused, their deep-set eyes narrowing as they studied the planet below. "Yes," they replied, voice calm but tinged with an odd sense of anticipation. "Let us begin." The Scifi had been studying human behavior from a distance, and now they had finally decided to get closer. The humans, it seemed, had no idea that other intelligent life existed beyond their planet. Zorath, along with the rest of the crew, had been tasked with learning more about the human race, but they had been told to proceed with caution. Despite all their technological superiority, the Scifi were not sure how humanity would react to their sudden appearance. Zorath had spent months reviewing reports and analyzing human behavior, but there was one aspect of humanity that baffled them: how humans interacted with each other in the most personal and intimate ways. Their breeding methods, as the Scifi referred to it, seemed utterly chaotic to Zorath's logical mind. The very idea of romance, of passionate attraction between two beings, seemed impossible to understand. In the Scifi culture, relationships were nothing more than strategic alliances, carefully arranged for the benefit of the species. There was no room for emotions like love, desire, or connection. The Scifi ship descended slowly through the atmosphere, landing in a remote area in a forest. The humans around the landing site would be the first to witness the presence of these visitors from another world. Zorath's team disembarked, their bodies shimmering as they adjusted to Earth's gravity. The air smelled fresh, full of the scent of trees and flowers. But it was still strange to the aliens who had never breathed anything but the sterile, controlled atmosphere of their ships. The humans had no idea what to expect. Zorath had briefed their crew carefully. The mission was simple: observe, communicate, and study. But as Zorath stepped onto the planet's surface, they couldn't shake a growing sense of curiosity. What was it about humanity that had intrigued them so much? Why did their emotional, chaotic nature seem so compelling? A group of humans approached the site, their eyes wide in shock. Zorath, towering over them at nearly 7 feet tall, extended a hand in a gesture of peace. The humans hesitated, unsure whether they should be afraid or curious. Zorath's voice, when they spoke, was smooth and calm, a soothing sound that carried across the clearing. "We come in peace," Zorath said, though part of them wondered if that phrase even meant anything to these humans. "We are explorers from a distant star system. We wish to learn about your people." The humans stared, confused but not immediately fearful. The leader of the group, a tall man with short, dark hair, stepped forward. He had the look of a scientist, his eyes intelligent but skeptical. "Who are you? Where are you from?" Zorath smiled, or at least, they tried to. The Scifi didn't smile in the way humans did, but they understood the gesture was a sign of goodwill. "We are the Scifi," Zorath explained. "We come from a world beyond your stars." The humans looked at each other, exchanging nervous glances. One of the women in the group, a younger scientist with glasses, stepped closer. Are you "Are you saying you're aliens?" "Yes," Zoreth confirmed. "We are not from your planet." The group fell silent, eyes wide, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. Zoreth realized they would have to take their time. Humans, it seemed, were more unpredictable than the Scifi had anticipated. Their reactions were driven by something far more complex than the cool, logical analysis Zoreth was used to. "We've been studying your species for some time," Zoreth continued, "but there are things about your behavior that we do not understand. Your mating rituals, for example." The words left Zoreth's mouth before they could stop them. There was no going back now. The humans seemed taken aback, their faces flushing slightly. The man who had spoken earlier, the scientist, cleared his throat and gave Zoreth an uneasy smile. "Ah, well, that's a little complicated." Zoreth's curiosity deepened. Humans were not just strange to look at. They were strange in the very way they lived, loved, and interacted with each other. And that, more than anything, fascinated Zoreth. As the day wore on, Zoreth knew one thing for sure. Humanity was going to change everything they thought they knew about life, love, and the very nature of existence. Zoreth had always prided themselves on their logical mind, their ability to analyze situations with precision. In the Scifi civilization, everything was calculated, every action purposeful. Emotions, feelings, and passion were things of the past, no longer necessary in a society that had perfected itself. But now, standing on Earth among the humans, Zoreth was facing something entirely unfamiliar. The humans' mating rituals were baffling, unpredictable, and filled with emotion. To Zoreth, it was illogical. How could something so chaotic, so untamed, play such an important role in the survival of a species? The Scifi had long ago abandoned such rituals in favor of clinical procedures. Reproduction for them was a controlled process, carefully planned and executed with scientific precision. But humans were different. Zoreth had witnessed the first glimpse of these strange rituals earlier in the day. A pair of humans had caught each other's eye, and without saying much, they had shared a moment of connection. A quiet look, a soft smile, a touch that spoke more than words could. It was a simple interaction, but Zoreth couldn't shake the feeling that there was something profound happening. Later that evening, Zoreth gathered with their crew to discuss the strange observations they had made. As the team convened in the ship's observation room, Zoreth couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in understanding what had just transpired. The humans had seemed so raw, so emotionally driven. Zoreth's mind raced as they tried to piece together the fragments of their observations. "What is this love they speak of?" Zoreth asked, their voice calm but laced with confusion. "I don't understand. How can such an emotional bond be so important?" Lyra, Zoreth's second-in-command, was quick to respond. "It's illogical. Their entire existence seems to be governed by emotional impulses. It's as though their biology dictates their behavior, making them slaves to their feelings." Zoreth nodded, but deep inside, they couldn't fully agree. There was something mesmerizing about the humans' ability to form such deep, unexplainable connections. Zoreth had seen it for themselves. The way humans looked at each other with such intensity, the way their hearts seemed to guide their actions. Zoreth couldn't shake the thought that there was more to this than just emotion. Perhaps there was a deeper reason for it, one that the Scifi had overlooked in their pursuit of perfection. The next day, Zoreth decided to observe more closely. They had to know how this mating ritual worked. They needed answers. So, they requested a meeting with Alina, the human scientist they had encountered earlier. Alina had been curious about the Scifi too, and seemed open to learning more about Zoreth's species. When Zoreth arrived at the designated meeting place, Alina was waiting for them. She greeted them with a polite smile, but there was an underlying curiosity in her eyes. Alina had been studying alien life for years, but this was unlike anything she had ever imagined. The sight of Zoreth, an alien from a distant star system. Standing before her was both exciting and unsettling, but she was determined to learn more. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Zoreth said, their voice softer than usual. "The humans' mating rituals. How do they work? Why are they so important to your species?" Alina paused, choosing her words carefully. "Well, it's a bit complicated. Humans form relationships for many reasons: emotional, social, even biological. But at the core of it, our connections are driven by something deep within us. We seek out companionship, understanding, and love. It's a bond that transcends logic, a way to create something greater than ourselves." Zoreth tilted their head, absorbing her words. They could sense that Elena wasn't speaking in terms of science. Her explanation was wrapped in something Zoreth couldn't quite define: a warmth, a depth. The idea that something as powerful as love could exist without reason was an entirely foreign concept to Zoreth. "Love," Zoreth muttered, trying to grasp the word. "You believe that love is necessary for your survival?" Elena nodded. "In a way, yes. Love and connection are what drive us. Without it, we would be isolated, alone. We need each other, and that bond is what helps us build families, communities, and even entire societies. It's what makes us human." Zoreth was silent for a moment, processing her words. It was difficult to comprehend. The Scifi had no need for love, no need for such connections. They had evolved beyond them. Their relationships were founded on mutual benefit, not emotion. And yet, Zoreth couldn't help but feel drawn to Elena's words. There was something beautiful about the way she spoke about love. It was unlike anything Zoreth had ever known. As the conversation continued, Zoreth found themselves intrigued by the idea that humans needed each other in such a profound way. It was a concept that seemed so primitive, yet so essential to their existence. Zoreth couldn't deny the fact that they, too, were beginning to feel something stirring inside themselves. Was it possible that they were experiencing something similar to what the humans called love? But Zoreth wasn't sure. They had never known a feeling like this before. They had always relied on logic, on reason, on the certainty of their people's way of life. And yet, here they were, standing in front of a human, feeling something they couldn't explain. It was confusing, unsettling, and, if Zoreth were being honest with themselves, a little bit exciting. Later that night, as Zoreth returned to their ship, they couldn't help but reflect on their growing fascination with the humans and their rituals. The more they observed, the more they realized how much they still didn't understand. But one thing was clear: humanity's emotional connections, their ability to love, were far more powerful than Zoreth had ever imagined. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was something in that raw, untamed emotion that the Scifi had overlooked in their quest for perfection. Zoreth's mind raced as they walked through the human city, their sharp eyes scanning the bustling streets. The air felt different here, thicker with life. The human world was vibrant, filled with sounds, smells, and colors that the Scifi had never experienced. Everywhere they looked, there was a reminder of the raw energy that humans seemed to carry within them, a kind of energy that Zoreth could not quite understand but was beginning to find deeply fascinating. The more time Zoreth spent observing the humans, the more they realized something unexpected. There was an undeniable pull toward them, especially toward Elena. It was confusing and new, this feeling that stirred inside them whenever their eyes met, whenever she smiled or laughed in that way that seemed to light up everything around her. Zoreth tried to reason it away. Perhaps it was simply a result of the curiosity they felt about humans in general. After all, they had been studying these creatures for weeks, trying to understand them. But the feeling didn't go away. Elena was different from the other humans Zoreth had interacted with. There was something about her that seemed to connect with Zoreth in a way that no one else had. Her kindness, her intelligence, and the way she saw the world. It was all so unfamiliar, yet strangely inviting. Zoreth had spent so long in a world where emotion was pushed aside that being around Elena felt almost like a new beginning. Zoreth found themselves thinking about her more and more. They caught themselves searching for her in a crowd, hoping to spot her among the people. It was illogical, Zoreth told themselves. This couldn't be anything more than professional curiosity. But deep down, they knew that wasn't entirely true. There was something more, something that stirred within them when they thought about her. One evening, after a long day of research, Zoreth and Elena found themselves sitting together at a small outdoor cafe. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow across the city as the sky turned to deep shades of purple and orange. Zoreth had never noticed the beauty of Earth's sky before, but tonight it seemed to capture something inside them. Elena was speaking, her voice soft and comforting, but Zoreth couldn't focus on the words. All they could focus on was the way her eyes glistened when she spoke, the warmth in her smile, and the way her presence seemed to fill the space around them. Zoreth cleared their throat, trying to push the strange feelings aside. "Elena," they began, their voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, about human emotions, about your relationships." Elena looked at them, curious. "What about them?" Zoreth hesitated for a moment before speaking. "The way humans form bonds with each other, these connections you speak of, these feelings of love, it seems so complicated, yet so important to you." Elena smiled thoughtfully. "Love is complicated, yes, but it's also one of the most important things in our lives. It's what connects us, what makes us human. Without love, we wouldn't be able to form families, build communities, or even understand each other on a deeper level. It's the foundation of who we are." Zoreth was silent, trying to process her words. They had never experienced anything like love before. In the Scifi culture, connections were formed for the sake of logic, progress, and survival. Love in their world was seen as an outdated concept, something that humans clung to out of weakness. But the more Zoreth listened to Elena, the more they realized that love wasn't something weak at all. It was powerful. It was raw, unpredictable, and yet it seemed to give humans a strength that Zoreth couldn't quite comprehend. "Is it really that important?" Zoreth asked, their voice almost a whisper. Elena paused, looking at Zoreth with a softness that made Zoreth's heart race. "Yes," she said simply. "It's everything." The words hung in the air between them, a quiet truth that Zoreth felt deep inside. For a moment, they forgot the reason they were here, the mission, the research. All they could think about was the way Elena's voice seemed to reach into their very soul, stirring something inside them that they hadn't expected. But just as quickly as the moment came, it passed. Zoreth stood up abruptly, needing space to think. Elena looked up at them in surprise. "Zoreth," she asked gently, "is something wrong?" Zoreth looked at her, their minds swirling with confusion. They didn't know how to explain the strange feeling building inside them. This wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to feel anything like this. And yet, every time they were near Elena, it became harder and harder to ignore the pull. They couldn't just push it away. They didn't want to. "I need some time to think," Zoreth said quickly, their voice distant. Elena nodded, sensing the shift in the air between them. "I understand," she replied softly. "But you don't have to figure it all out right now, Zoreth. Take your time." Zoreth turned and walked away, their heart pounding. As they left the cafe and stepped into the quiet night, the feeling only grew stronger. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something they couldn't control, something that felt dangerous and yet thrilling. For the first time, Zoreth began to realize the truth. They were no longer just an observer. They had become part of the puzzle. The question no longer was, "What is love?" The question was, why did it have to be so powerful? As Zoreth walked through the streets of the city, their thoughts were a blur of emotions and logic, of connections and chaos. They had always thought that emotions were a weakness. But now, standing here, feeling this strange attraction toward Elena, They were beginning to wonder if perhaps they had been wrong all along. The Xerathi had long abandoned emotion, but Zorath was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, it was something worth understanding. Zorath paced around the ship's observation deck, their thoughts a tangled mess of confusion. The stars outside twinkled like cold diamonds in the blackness of space, a constant reminder of the vast emptiness of the universe. And yet, the closer Zorath got to understanding humanity, the more they realized how little they understood about themselves. How could something so illogical as love have such a powerful effect on the mind, the body, and the soul? Zorath had spent their life studying everything, mastering knowledge, and learning the ways of the universe. The Xerathi civilization had long ago evolved beyond the chaos of raw emotion. They were beings of perfect logic, where reason reigned supreme. Love, passion, desire, all were relics of an ancient past, left behind for the good of their species. But now, standing at the edge of a strange new world, Zorath was beginning to question everything they had once believed. Their thoughts turned again to Elena. Her face, her smile, the way she spoke about love. It was all so human. She seemed to believe it was everything. Zorath wasn't sure whether to be skeptical or to embrace the possibility that perhaps love was something they needed to explore, to understand. After their meeting in the cafe, Zorath had retreated to the ship, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. The feeling inside them had only grown stronger. The pull toward Elena, the desire to understand her world, was undeniable. But Zorath was still torn. They couldn't simply abandon everything they knew. The Xerathi had survived without love for millennia. Would it really help them? Or would it destroy them? The way it seemed to consume the humans. The door to the observation deck slid open, and Zorath's second-in-command, Lyra, stepped inside. Lyra was always calm, logical, and unwavering. She had been with Zorath from the beginning of their mission, and although Zorath valued her counsel, they knew Lyra would never understand the emotions stirring inside them. "Zorath," Lyra said, her voice firm, "you've been distant lately. I've noticed it. Is something troubling you?" Zorath turned to face Lyra, their eyes cold and distant, but inside they felt conflicted. The last thing they wanted was to explain their growing confusion over the human emotions they had observed, especially to Lyra. It would only make them seem weak, as though they were losing control. "I'm fine, Lyra," Zorath replied, their tone firm but not entirely convincing. "It's just the mission. There's so much to process." Lyra raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "You've been spending a lot of time with the humans, particularly with Elena. I've seen the way you look at her. Tell me, Zorath, is this mission still about learning about their culture? Or has something else become more important to you?" Zorath stiffened. The idea that Lyra had noticed their feelings sent a wave of unease through them. But they didn't know how to explain what was happening. They couldn't. "I'm still focused on the mission," Zorath said, the words sounding hollow even to their own ears. "But I'm starting to think there is more to these humans than we initially realized. Their emotions, their relationships, they're not just distractions. They're essential to their survival." Lyra's expression softened, though her tone remained skeptical. "Emotions are a weakness, Zorath. That's why the Xerathi have evolved beyond them. You've seen how it's held the humans back. Why would you want to get involved with something so unpredictable?" Zorath looked away, their gaze fixed on the stars outside. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound in the room. For a moment, Zorath allowed themselves to think about what Lyra had said. She was right, in a way. Emotions could be chaotic, irrational, and dangerous. But there was something inside Zorath that made them wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to it than they had been taught. "I don't know," Zorath admitted, their voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know why, but something about this. It feels important. More important than I ever thought." Lyra's eyes narrowed, but she didn't press further. She simply nodded, choosing to leave the conversation there. If you think it's important, then proceed cautiously. But remember, our mission is to observe, not to get entangled in their affairs. Zorath gave a quick nod, but their thoughts were far from the mission. As Lyra left the room, Zorath found themselves once again thinking about Alina. The pull they felt toward her was stronger now, and with each passing day, the lines between observation and involvement blurred further. Zorath couldn't deny the growing attraction, the deep curiosity that seemed to have woven itself into everything they did. That night, Zorath couldn't sleep. Their mind was consumed by thoughts of Alina. They remembered their first meeting with her, how she had looked at them with such wonder, such innocence. She had been the first human to speak to them without fear. And now, Zorath was beginning to understand why. They realized that what had begun as a scientific curiosity had blossomed into something far deeper, something that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. They couldn't ignore it any longer. The bond they felt was growing. And it was no longer just about understanding human behavior. It was about something more, something personal. Zorath stood up from their bed, their heart pounding in their chest. They had to see Alina again. They had to speak with her, to understand what these feelings meant. It was time to confront the truth. The next morning, Zorath arranged to meet Alina at a small park near the city. As they approached the location, they saw her standing by a bench, looking up at the sky with a smile on her face. The sun's rays lit up her features, casting a soft glow around her. Zorath's heart skipped a beat. When Alina turned and saw them approaching, her smile widened. "Zorath," she greeted warmly. "I was hoping you'd come." For the first time in a long while, Zorath felt a sense of peace wash over them. This moment, this simple interaction with Alina, felt more real than anything they had experienced in their life. As they sat down beside her, Zorath felt something inside them shift. They no longer wanted to simply observe humanity. They'd wanted to understand it, to feel it, and maybe, just maybe, they wanted to experience it for themselves. The days passed quickly, and each one seemed to bring Zorath closer to a realization they had been trying to avoid. Their interactions with Alina had become more frequent, and each conversation left them feeling more confused yet more alive. Zorath had never experienced anything like this before. In the past, they had relied on logic and control. Emotions were an unnecessary distraction, a weakness that had no place in the pursuit of knowledge. But now, Zorath found themselves drawn to Alina in a way they couldn't explain. Her laugh, her thoughtful words, the way she always seemed to find beauty in the simplest things, everything about her seemed to pull them in. They had never felt such a strong connection with anyone, and it terrified them. Zorath had come to understand something essential about themselves. They were no longer just observing humanity. They were becoming a part of it. It was both exhilarating and unsettling. For so long, Zorath had prided themselves on their distance from the emotional chaos of others. They had told themselves that their mission was purely about understanding the humans, but now they knew it was more than that. As Zorath walked through the city once again, their mind wandered back to the park where they had met Alina the other day. The memory of their time together lingered, a pleasant warmth that followed them everywhere. They had spoken about many things: Earth's history, the nature of humanity, and even their own worlds. But despite the depth of their conversations, Zorath couldn't help but feel there was something left unsaid, something that both of them were carefully avoiding. Zorath didn't know if they were ready to face it. The tension between them had been building, but they were unsure if Alina felt the same pull they did. She had never spoken of feelings, at least not directly. Was she simply being kind, or was there something more? Zorath couldn't risk assuming, especially when they weren't even sure how to process their own emotions. Later that afternoon, Zorath and Alina found themselves alone again in a quiet corner of the city. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets. Alina looked at Zorath, her face lit by the soft glow of the fading sunlight. "Zorath," Alina said, her voice a little hesitant, I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, about what you said the other day. Zorath looked at her, waiting for her to continue. You've been observing us for so long, she continued, and I think you've learned more about humanity than you realize. But I also think you're struggling with something, and I want to help, if I can. Zorath's heart skipped a beat. Alina had noticed. She always seemed to understand them better than anyone else. I'm not sure what you mean, Zorath replied, their voice steady, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty that they couldn't hide. Alina smiled softly, a look of compassion in her eyes. I think you're struggling with your feelings. About love. About connection. Zorath felt a wave of emotion wash over them, a mixture of relief and anxiety. Alina knew. She knew exactly what they had been avoiding. I don't understand it, Zorath admitted, their voice barely above a whisper. I don't know why I feel this way. I've never felt anything like this before. And I don't know what to do with it. Alina reached out, her hand resting gently on Zorath's arm. The touch was unexpected but comforting. Zorath could feel the warmth of her hand through the fabric of their clothing. They had never known such simple gestures could hold so much meaning. You don't have to understand it all at once, Alina said softly. Feelings don't always make sense. Sometimes they just are. You don't need to have all the answers right now. Zorath looked at her, their mind racing. It was so simple, and yet it was exactly what they needed to hear. For the first time in a long while, they didn't feel the need to have everything figured out. Maybe, for once, it was okay to let go of control. But even as they began to relax, a deep uncertainty still lingered within Zorath. They had always been taught that emotion was something to be managed, something to be controlled. Could they really let go of all they had known? Could they embrace this new feeling without losing themselves? Alina seemed to sense the hesitation in Zorath's thoughts. Zorath, she said gently, you're not alone in this. Whatever this feeling is, we can explore it together. You don't have to carry it by yourself. The words resonated deeply within Zorath. It was strange. In their own world, they had never needed anyone. That Scifi were self-sufficient, independent, and emotionally distant. But here, with Alina, it was different. The thought of facing this uncertainty alone no longer seemed necessary. Perhaps for the first time, it was okay to rely on someone else. Zorath inhaled deeply, gathering the courage to speak. Alina, I don't know what this is, or where it will lead, but I feel something I can't explain, and I don't want to ignore it anymore. Alina's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for Zorath to say those very words. I think that's the first step, she said with a gentle smile, just acknowledging it. From there, we'll see where it takes us. Zorath's heart pounded in their chest, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was a mix of anticipation and something else, something that felt almost like hope. For the first time, Zorath felt as if they were standing at the edge of something new and unknown. The boundaries that had once seemed so clear between them and the humans were beginning to blur. The walls they had built around their emotions were starting to crumble. And maybe, just maybe, Zorath was ready to let them fall completely. Zorath had always known that the universe was vast and unpredictable, but now, as they walked alongside Alina through the bustling streets of the human city, they realized that the greatest unknown was not the stars, but the emotions they had long kept hidden. It had been a few days since their conversation in the park, and things between them had changed. The air around Zorath felt different, lighter, yet filled with an intensity they couldn't quite explain. There was a new understanding between them, one that hadn't existed before. Alina's presence no longer felt like something to observe from a distance, but rather something to be a part of, to engage with. As they walked, Alina spoke animatedly about the latest news from Earth, her eyes shining with passion as she discussed her favorite subjects. Zorath listened intently, but their thoughts often drifted. Every time their eyes met, they felt that strange, powerful pull that had been growing stronger with each passing day. Zorath had learned to enjoy these moments with Alina, but at the same time, they felt the weight of the conflict within. The Scifi were a species of reason, of control. Emotions had no place in their world. And yet here, in the midst of this vibrant planet, Zorath was beginning to realize that their entire perspective was shifting. "You're quiet today," Alina said, breaking through Zorath's thoughts. She glanced at them with a playful smile, but there was a trace of concern in her eyes. "Something on your mind?" Zorath hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They had been wrestling with this strange new feeling for so long, and they weren't sure if they were ready to fully embrace it. But Alina was kind, patient. She had always been that way. "I've been thinking about us," Zorath said, their voice soft. "About how I've been feeling lately. About how everything has changed." Alina stopped walking and turned to face them. Her expression was open, understanding. "You don't have to explain everything all at once, Zorath," she said gently. "I'm here, whenever you're ready." Zorath felt a wave of gratitude wash over them. Alina wasn't rushing them, wasn't pushing for answers. She was simply there, offering her presence and her support. It was something Zorath had never known they needed, but now they couldn't imagine living without it. "I don't understand it all," Zorath continued, their voice filled with uncertainty. "This feeling, it's unlike anything I've ever known. I was raised to believe that emotions were distractions, weaknesses, but now, every time I'm with you, I feel something that I can't ignore, something powerful, something that draws me in." Alina's eyes softened as she reached out, placing a hand gently on Zorath's arm. "Zorath, it's okay," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You're not alone in this. And you don't have to be afraid of what you're feeling." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that Zorath hadn't expected. They had spent so much of their life suppressing emotion, focusing only on what could be understood and controlled. But now, in Alina's presence, they were beginning to understand that there was more to life than logic and reason. There was beauty in feeling, in connecting with others on a deeper level. There was strength in vulnerability. Zorath took a deep breath, their heart pounding in their chest. They had been afraid of losing control, of letting go of everything they had been taught. But now, they were starting to see that control wasn't everything. Here was something else, something beyond logic and reason, that could be just as powerful. "I don't know what this is," Zorath said, their voice trembling slightly. "But I can't deny it anymore. I care about you, Alina, more than I ever thought was possible." Alina smiled, her eyes full of warmth. "I care about you too, Zorath," she said softly. "And that's all that matters right now." For the first time, Zorath felt the weight of their internal conflict lift. The fear, the doubt, it was still there, but it no longer held them back. They were no longer afraid of what they were feeling. Instead, they were beginning to embrace it. As they stood there in the middle of the bustling city, with people rushing by and the sounds of the world all around them, Zorath realized that this moment, this connection with Alina, was more than anything they had ever imagined. They had spent so long searching for knowledge, for answers, but they were beginning to understand that some things couldn't be measured or explained. Some things had to be felt. Zorath looked at Alina, their eyes meeting in a moment of quiet understanding. For once, they didn't feel the need to say anything more. The words were unnecessary. They could feel the truth of their connection in the silence between them. "I think I'm ready," Zorath said, their voice steady. "I'm ready to let go of the fear, ready to accept what this is, whatever it is." Alina's smile widened, and she nodded. "I'm glad," she said softly. "Because whatever happens, I'll be here. You're not alone in this." And with that, something inside Zorath shifted. The walls they had spent so long building, walls of reason, walls of distance, began to crumble. They no longer had to be afraid of their emotions, of their connection with Alina. In that moment, Zorath realized that they didn't need all the answers. They didn't need to know everything. They just needed to feel, to experience, and to trust that whatever came next, they would face it together. The city continued to move around them, but for Zoreth, time seemed to slow. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment they had been too afraid to step into. But now, they had crossed the line. They had embraced the unknown, and there was no turning back. The days that followed felt different to Zoreth. The shift had happened slowly, almost imperceptibly, but now it was undeniable. They were no longer the same person they had been when they first arrived on Earth. The walls that had once kept them detached, focused only on their mission, were crumbling, and in their place, a new understanding was taking root. An understanding of emotions, of connection, of what it meant to truly care for another being. Zoreth had begun to learn, slowly, how to open themselves up to these feelings. They still struggled, of course. Their training as a Scifi had taught them to keep their distance, to be rational and unyielding. But each day spent with Elena made it easier to let go of the fear and uncertainty. She had become not only a teacher but a guide, helping Zoreth navigate this uncharted territory of the heart. The morning sun poured through the large windows of the ship, casting long shadows across the room where Zoreth sat, contemplating. They had always believed that logic was the key to everything. But now, it seemed as if the most important things in life couldn't be understood through logic alone. Some things simply had to be felt, experienced, and accepted. Zoreth stood up and walked over to the small console in the corner of the room. They had a message from Elena, one that had arrived earlier that morning. She had invited them to meet her at the city's central plaza, a place they had visited several times before. Zoreth's heart raced at the thought of seeing her again. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something more profound, something that felt like a pull from deep within their soul. With a deep breath, Zoreth made their way to the transport hub. The city outside the ship's docking bay was alive with movement. People going about their daily routines, vehicles flying overhead, and the hum of the bustling streets. Zoreth took in the sights and sounds with a sense of wonder, something they hadn't experienced in the early days of their mission. At first, Earth had been just another planet to study, but now it felt like a world full of possibilities, full of experiences waiting to be discovered. As they arrived at the plaza, Zoreth saw Elena standing near a fountain, her gaze directed upward as if lost in thought. Her presence always seemed to bring a sense of calm to Zoreth, and they couldn't help but feel a rush of warmth at the sight of her. Elena turned as they approached, her smile brightening when she saw Zoreth. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice soft and welcoming. "I wouldn't have missed it," Zoreth replied, their tone steady, but their heart raced with excitement. They had come to realize that moments like these, simple, quiet moments with Elena, were the ones that meant the most. They walked together through the plaza, side by side, the sounds of the city filling the space between them. But Zoreth no longer felt the distance that had once seemed so vast. Now it felt like they were walking the same path, connected in a way they hadn't been before. "So, what's been on your mind?" Elena asked after a while. "You've been quieter than usual lately." Zoreth considered her question carefully. They had been quiet, not because they had nothing to say, but because so much was happening inside them. The emotions they had once tried to suppress were now coming to the surface, and they weren't sure how to express them. But with Elena, it felt different. She had always made them feel safe, understood. "I've been thinking about how much I've changed since coming here," Zoreth said slowly. "When I first arrived, I thought I understood everything. I believed that knowledge and reason were the most important things. But now, I see that there's more. I've learned that emotions, love, connection, are just as important as logic, maybe even more so." Elena stopped walking and turned to face Zoreth. Her expression was one of quiet understanding. "I think you've always known that," she said softly. "Maybe you just needed to give yourself permission to feel it." Zoreth looked at her, their eyes searching hers for any sign of judgment or doubt. But there was nothing but kindness in her gaze. For the first time, Zoreth realized that they didn't need to be afraid of their emotions. They didn't need to hide from the feelings they had for Alina. She had never once made them feel as though they were weak for caring. "You're right," Zoreth said, a small smile forming on their lips. "I'd spent so long trying to be someone I thought I should be. But now, I think I'm ready to be who I truly am." Alina's smile grew wider, and she stepped closer to Zoreth. "And who is that?" Zoreth took a deep breath, their heart pounding in their chest. "Someone who is no longer afraid to feel," they said simply. Alina's eyes sparkled, and she placed a hand on Zoreth's. "I'm glad to hear that, because I've been hoping you would say that." The moment hung between them, the world around them fading into the background. For the first time, Zoreth felt as though they were no longer alone in their journey. They had Alina by their side, and together, they were exploring something neither of them fully understood. But that uncertainty no longer scared Zoreth. It was just another part of the experience. "I've been thinking about something else, too," Zoreth said after a moment. "About the future. About what comes next." Alina raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Zoreth said, their voice steady but filled with emotion, "that I want to be with you, not just as a part of the mission, but as something more. I want to experience this, whatever this is, with you." Alina's eyes softened, and she squeezed Zoreth's hand. "I feel the same way." And just like that, everything fell into place. The fear, the uncertainty, the doubts, everything melted away. Zoreth no longer felt the weight of their past. They were ready to step forward, not as a detached observer, but as someone who was willing to take a chance on love, on connection, on the future. Together, they would face whatever came next. And for the first time, Zoreth was certain that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they wouldn't have to face them alone.